If stories about found family, second chance, and quiet healing touch your heart, please like this video and subscribe so you don't miss the next emotional story we share on this channel. The storm came in fast that night. Snow pushed along the main street of Willow Ridge in hard, slanting sheets, swallowing the yellow glow of the old street lamps. Most of the shops had shut hours ago. Only one still had its lights on. Thread and ember. From the outside, it was a narrow slice of warmth in the cold front window fogged slightly. A mannequin in a half-finished dress, soft light pooling over bolts of fabric. Inside, Harper Quinn bent over her sewing machine, shoulders rounded, hair pulled back with a pencil. The machine hummed steadily. A tiny pile of scarlet thread collected on her knee. She glanced at the clock. Almost midnight. Just finish this hem, she murmured to herself. Then bed. Her eyes burned. She'd been altering winter coats all week for people who had owned them too long and shrugged into them too many winters. Willow Ridge was like that. Nobody bought new unless they had to. They brought things to Harper, and she stitched another season into them. The wind hit the front of the building hard enough to rattle the glass. Harper flinched and lifted her foot from the pedal. The machine fell silent. For a moment, she thought she'd imagined the other sound. A faint, thin noise under the howl of the wind, a kind of cry, high and small. Her skin prickled. She shut off the machine and listened. There it was again, not the pipes, not the radio upstairs, a sound from outside, weak, then cutting off, then starting again. She stood, every tired muscle protesting, and crossed the showroom. The bell above the door chimed when she unlatched it. A gust of freezing air slammed into her. For a second, all she saw was white. Then her gaze dropped. A wicker basket sat on the doorstep, half buried in snow. Harper stared. The crying came from there, from inside the basket. She dropped to her knees in the drift, hands already reaching. Her fingers were clumsy with cold, but she pushed the snow back, peeled away the edge of a purple velvet blanket. Two tiny faces looked up at her. They were red and scrunched, mouths open on soundless, exhausted cries. They were wrapped tight together in the same blanket, like someone had set them down gently but in a hurry. Their cheeks were mottled from the cold. Twins, she thought. They're twins. Each little neck had a thin chain around it. A small silver leaf charm rested on each fragile chest, half hidden by the edge of the blanket. Harper's breath fogged in the air. She looked up and down the empty street. No cars, no figures, only the storm. A sane person, she told herself, would go back inside, lock the door, and call the police before touching anything else. Let the system come, let professionals handle it. But the wind struck her face, and for a heartbeat the world tilted, and she wasn't 24 in a tiny shop anymore. She was 16, in a low-rent apartment, with suitcases on the floor and her little brother Milo clutching the hem of her coat as a social worker stood in the doorway. "He'll be better off there," the woman had said. "It's not a punishment, Harper. It's an opportunity." Harper had begged. She'd promised to work more hours, to get better grades, to do anything. It hadn't mattered. Milo had been peeled from her arms, buckled into the back of a car, and driven away. She'd never seen him again. The cold cut through the memory. The babies in the basket cried weakly, their lips trembling. Harper reached in before she could stop herself. The blanket was damp at the edges. She scooped both infants up at once, along with the velvet and the basket and everything, and backed into the shop. The door swung shut behind her. Heat wrapped around them like a second blanket. She kicked the lockdown with her heel. The twins were so light. One flailed a fist, hitting the air uselessly. The other's cry broke into a hiccup and, "Hey," Harper whispered, voice rough. "Hey, it's okay. It's okay. I've got you." She laid them on the wide cutting table and turned the overhead light so it didn't glare directly in their faces. She checked their fingers, their toes, the color of their gums. She didn't know much, but she knew enough to see that they were cold and hungry but alive. Her eyes caught on something tucked in the corner of the basket. A photograph creased and torn in half. She picked it up carefully. On the small, glossy rectangle, a young woman smiled at the camera. She held two infants in her arms, their faces turned toward her. The top half of the picture was missing. No background, no context. Only the woman and the babies, and a sense that something had been cut away. Harper flipped it over. On the back, in faint ink blurred by water, were a few words. For the one who keeps them together. Her throat tightened. She looked down at the real babies lying on her table. Their faces less red now, eyes squeezed shut. "Who leaves you like this?" she whispered. In the snow, one of them let out a tiny sigh, as if answering, then wriggled closer to her sister. Harper brushed a flake of melting snow from the edge of the blanket. The logical thing, the safe thing, was still to pick up the phone, call emergency services, hand the situation over, let them be processed, placed, evaluated, sorted, like boxes, like she and Milo had been. Her fingers curled instead around the edge of the basket. "If no one else will keep you together," she said softly, the words coming before she could think them, "I will." The decision landed like a stitch pulled tight. She knew she would still have to go to the hospital. She knew there would be paperwork and questions and a trail of things she couldn't control. But between this moment and all of that, there would be one night where she could hold them in her arms and know they were warm, where no stranger with a clipboard could pull them apart. "One night," she murmured. "Just one." She moved fast then. She warmed towels in the dryer and wrapped the babies one at a time, careful not to tangle the leaf necklaces. She held them against her chest until her own body heat chased the last shivers from their limbs. Dawn bled slowly into the sky behind the clouds before she finally sat on the worn couch in the back room. Both babies tucked against her, their breath soft against her collarbone. She stared at the torn photograph on the coffee table. She traced the faint ink with her finger. "For the one who keeps them together." "Okay," she whispered into the quiet, into the tiny space between their heads. "Okay. I'm here." Their fingers twitched against her skin, gripping nothing and everything. Harper closed her eyes, exhausted, and listened to the storm ease away. 5 winters later, Willow Ridge glittered. It was the weekend of the Winter Lights Fair, the one time a year the little town looked like the postcards tourists imagined. Strings of warm bulbs draped between lampposts, paper snowflakes taped to shop windows. Children in knit hats ran in shrieking loops, leaving footprints in the thin blanket of new snow. Thread and Ember had never been so busy. Harper had spent weeks hemming dresses, mending scarves, and altering costumes for the children's performances. Her hands ached. She'd pricked her fingers so many times they looked like they belonged to a guitar player, not a seamstress. But when she watched Iris and Luna twirl in front of the mirror, it felt worth it. "You look like storybook princesses," she said, stepping back. Iris studied her reflection seriously. Her dress was pale pink, the skirt full but soft, overlaid with a sheer layer of tulle scattered with embroidered leaves. Her hair, fine and fair, was pulled back with a ribbon. "I don't want to be a princess," she said after a moment. "I want to be a painter." Luna, standing beside her, grinned. "I want to be a dragon," she announced, then bared her teeth and blew out a little puff of air. Harper laughed. "You can be a painter dragon," she said, "as long as you hold still long enough to get through the performance without knocking anyone off the stage." Both girls wore their silver leaf necklaces. They never took them off. Harper felt her chest squeeze for a moment, as it always did when she saw the thin chains against their skin. The hospital had taken them the morning after that stormy night. There had been questions and paperwork and long hours under bright lights while nurses checked tiny vitals and social workers took notes. Harper had given the necklaces and the half photo to the nurse with shaking hands. "They were with them in the basket," she'd said. "Please don't. We'll keep them," the nurse had promised, as evidence, as proof. Harper had gone home alone that night, arms empty, her jacket still smelling like baby powder and snow. Days later, after more questions and more paper, the necklaces and photograph had been returned to her, along with temporary guardianship papers. Temporary had turned into years. The situation had never been fully regularized. Not the way the pamphlets described. There were outdated foster records on Harper gathering dust in some office, a caseworker who rotated out, a file that never seemed to make it all the way to the top of someone's stack. But the girls were here. They were warm. They were fed. They learned to thread needles before they could tie their own shoelaces. They knew the names of every fabric in the shop. That was what mattered. Harper pushed away the flicker of worry that always came when she thought about the unopened letters in the old tin box upstairs. "Come on," she said. "We'll be late. And if we're late, Mrs. Alden will have my head." Mrs. Alden, who directed the children's performances, took punctuality more seriously than most people took religion. The girls giggled. Harper helped them into their winter coats, careful not to catch the necklace chains in the zippers, and they stepped out into the crisp air. The town square was a short walk away. Banners fluttered. The makeshift stage had been set up by the old fountain, its stone bowl now full of snow instead of water. On the far side of the square, next to a banner that read, "Thank you, Cole Biogen, for supporting our clinic," a man in a dark wool coat stood with the mayor, speaking into a microphone. Harper didn't pay much attention at first. Her focus was on keeping Luna from wandering too far ahead and making sure Iris didn't get jostled. "Who's that?" Luna asked, tugging at her sleeve, nodding toward the stage. "Some important person from the city," Harper said. "He gave the hospital a lot of money." "That's what Mrs. Alden said." The man's voice carried over the speakers, calm, practiced, the kind of tone used in boardrooms and interviews. Adrian Cole did not want to be in Willow Ridge. He had told his assistant that twice, but the assistant had reminded him, gently, that Cole Biogen's partnership with small-town clinics was worth millions, but that his presence would reassure investors, that the PR team had already crafted the headlines. "Survivor CEO brings hope to rural healthcare." He'd swallowed his reluctance and boarded the helicopter anyway. Now, as he smiled for the cameras and shook the mayor's hand, he felt like he was watching himself from a distance, as he often did, as if the real Adrian had burned away 4 years ago in a narrow street in Seattle. The crowd clapped politely when he handed over an oversized ceremonial check. He said the words he was supposed to say: "Health shouldn't depend on your zip code. We're committed to bringing innovation to every community." His mouth kept moving. Then, as the mayor began to speak again, the music changed. The MC announced the next part of the evening. "Now our children's winter performance, with costumes made by our very own local seamstresses and tailors." Little figures started lining up at the edge of the stage. Adrian almost stepped away, ready to leave the square and the obligation in the eyes. Then he saw them, 2 girls, side by side, in matching soft pink dresses. They were small, 5 or 6 at most, cheeks flushed from the cold, hair like pale wheat under the lights. They moved almost in sync without looking at each other, as if some invisible thread tugged their shoulders at the same time. His body went still. His vision narrowed. They stepped into the light, turned just so, and the world tilted on its axis. Silver flashed at their throats, 2 small leaf-shaped pendants, catching the stage lights, swinging gently against pink fabric. There were many leaf charms in the world. He knew that. But there were not many with that exact curve, that exact tiny notch at the edge where he had argued with the jeweler over the design. There were not many that matched exactly the ones that had once rested on 2 tiny blankets in his wife Elena's arms. His lungs forgot their job. The crowd around him blurred. Sound fell away. The girls began their part, moving in a simple circle, dance with the other children. One he learned later that this was Iris kept glancing at the audience, eyes wide, as if trying to absorb everything. The other, Luna, grinned openly, clearly enjoying the attention. They did not look exactly like the babies in his memories. Of course they didn't. Those babies had been chubby and new, eyes mostly closed. These children had defined cheekbones, expressions, personalities. But their eyes, the angle of their noses, the way their hairline curved at the temples, and the necklaces, his chest hurt. Elena had died in the fire. He had been in another city, in another time zone, signing a contract, when his phone had buzzed again and again on the table. He hadn't seen it until after the meeting. By then, it was already over. The investigators had told him the girls must have died quickly. The fire had moved fast, fed by faulty wiring in the smart home system his own company had helped design. No bodies had been found, just remains too damaged to identify. He had ordered tiny white coffins anyway. He had watched them lower into the ground. He had thrown a handful of dirt in. He had walked away with his heart charred and his skin somehow intact. And he had never really come back. Now, under the winter lights in a town he'd never been to before, he watched two small girls dance in dresses stitched by a stranger and silver leaves bouncing at their throats and thought, "They're alive." The thought was too big. It didn't fit. His hand trembled. He forced himself to breathe, to wait, to not grab the arm of the nearest person and scream the truth in their face. When the performance ended, the children trooped off the stage. Parents surged forward, clapping and bending to hug them. Adrian moved without thinking, slipping between bodies, his height and presence parting the crowd. One of the girls, Luna, broke away from the group, chasing a dusting of snow that had started to drift down. She tripped on her own shoelace and went down on one knee, letting out an offended huff. Before she could get back up, he was there, kneeling in front of her. "Hey," he said without meaning to. His voice came out gentler than he'd heard it in years. "You okay?" She looked up at him. Her eyes were a shade of blue he knew better than his own. He swallowed. "I'm fine," she said, then looked at her undone laces with dramatic disgust. "These shoes are mean." He laughed, the sound rusty. "May I?" he asked, fingers hovering near her ankle. She nodded solemnly. He tied the laces as carefully as if he were disarming a bomb. Up close, he could see the tiny scratch near the edge of the leaf charm, the one that had made Elena laugh when he'd fumbled the original pendant. "You scratched it," she'd said. "Now they'll know it's real." The child inhaled, nose wrinkling. "You smell like—" She squinted, searching for the word, "like that pink room." His hands stilled. "What pink room?" he asked, very softly. She shrugged. "The one in the dream," she said, "with the soft blanket and the stars on the ceiling." Adrian's vision swam. Elena had painted little stars on the nursery ceiling. He had watched her balance on a ladder, blue paint on her fingers, laughing when he told her she could hire someone instead. He looked up. Over Luna's shoulder, a woman stood a few feet away. She was small, with dark hair pulled into a loose bun, a thrift store coat belted tight at the waist. Her hands were clenched at her sides, but her face was calm in that way you only get after years of playing calm for people who depend on you. Their eyes met. For a second, an entire conversation passed between them. "Who are you? Who are you?" "My mom," Luna said brightly, noticing his gaze. She waved an arm. "Mommy Harper. My shoe attacked me, but the tall man fixed it." Harper Quinn walked toward them, heart hammering so hard she thought it might show through her coat. She had seen the tall man on the stage with the mayor. She had heard his name over the speakers. Adrian Cole. She'd filed it away as unimportant, along with most names of men in suits. Now, watching him kneel in the snow, tying her daughter's shoelace, something inside her shifted. "Thank you," she said, voice steady. He stood, brushing snow from his knees. "No problem," he said. His words were for her, but his eyes went back to the girls. The other twin had joined them now. Iris. She stood half a step behind Harper, watching him with open curiosity. He wanted to ask 1,000 questions. He wanted to demand answers. He wanted to run. Instead, he extended a hand. "I'm Adrian," he said. "I'm in town for work." Harper took his hand. Her fingers were rough with calluses, warm from the gloves she'd just pulled off. She did not ask what kind of work. People in Willow Ridge didn't. "I'm Harper," she said. "These are my girls." She didn't say adopted. She didn't say found. She didn't say temporary custody. They were hers. He heard something under the simple words, a challenge, a promise, a fear. "It's nice to meet you," he said. He forced himself to step back, to let them go when the next group of children was called. He stood on the edge of the square as they disappeared into the crowd, as the lights blurred and the music shifted and the wind pushed snow in tiny spirals along the ground. Under his coat, his hand slipped into his pocket, closing around a worn piece of photo paper he carried everywhere. Half a photograph. He thought of the two girls, of Silver Leaves, of a voice in his memory whispering, for the one who keeps them together. He knew, then, that he would not be leaving Willow Ridge for a while. Thread and Ember had been many things over the years. To Harper, it had been a refuge, a joy, a home, a place where she could control at least one small corner of the world with a needle and thread. To Iris and Luna, it was simply the center of their universe. The front room held the bright things mannequins, sunlight through the big window, jars of buttons that sparkled like candy. The back room held the work patterns pinned to corkboard, shelves of fabric, the hum of the machine. Upstairs, on the narrow mezzanine, were their beds and a tiny kitchen. The ceiling was low. The radiator clanked in winter. The roof leaked in one stubborn spot until Harper fixed it herself with tar and determination. It wasn't big. It wasn't fancy, but it was theirs. The first time Adrian Cole walked into Thread and Ember, a tiny bell above the door announced his presence in a cheerful jingle that felt out of place with the weight in his chest. Just a second, Harper called from the back. He looked around, the professional part of his brain cataloging details even as the rest of him felt oddly off balance. Old wooden floors, a sewing machine that had seen better decades, a wall of thread in every color, a framed photograph of the Winter Lights Fair from a previous year, slightly askew. In the corner, two small jackets hung side by side, pink, a little worn at the cuffs. His throat tightened again. "Sorry," Harper said as she came through the curtain, wiping her hands on her apron. She had a pencil tucked behind one ear and a dusting of chalk on her forearm. "I was fighting with a zipper." She stopped when she saw him. "Oh," she said, "Mr. Cole." He could tell she wasn't used to calling anyone Mr. It sat awkwardly on her tongue. "Adrian is fine," he said. "I was told you're the best tailor in town." She snorted softly. "I'm the only tailor in town," she said, "but I appreciate the compliment." He smiled, genuinely this time. "I was hoping to have the suit altered," he said, "or maybe made. There's an event in the city next month. I've worn the same thing to every gala for 4 years. My assistant says that's a crime." Her eyebrows lifted. "You wanted something bespoke," she said. "Is that the word?" he asked. She nodded. "It is," she said. "Do you have any idea what you want?" He could have said no. He could have said he didn't care. Instead, he heard himself say something that doesn't feel like armor. Her gaze flicked up to his face, sharp for a second. Then she gestured to a measuring platform. "Step up," she said. "We'll start there." The process was slow and strangely intimate. She circled him with a tape measure, calling out numbers under her breath, jotting them on a pad. Her fingers brushed his shoulders, his wrists, the span of his chest. She was professional, focused. For her, this was work. For him, it was the first time in a long time someone had touched him for a reason that wasn't sympathy or transaction. "You are very still," she said after a while. "Most people fidget." "Old habit," and he said, "boardrooms." "Ah," she smirked. "You're one of those." "One of what?" he asked. "The suits," she said. "The ones who sign things." His mouth quirked. "Guilty," he said. She moved behind him, measuring the slope of his back. "You could have gone to any tailor in the city," she said. "Why come here?" He could have lied. He didn't. "I saw your work on stage," he said. "On the girls' dresses." She froze for half a heartbeat. Then the tape slid along his arm again. "They were happy," he added quietly. "On that stage, you made something that made them happy." "That's the job," she said. But there was a softness in her tone now. The curtain behind them rustled. Mommy Iris's voice wove into the room. "Is the soup done?" Luna says she's starving. Luna's voice followed, louder. "I am starving. I'm bones." Harper sighed. "I told you to stay upstairs until I finish this," she called back. "But we smelled bread," Luna said, leaning around the curtain with theatrical suspicion. Her eyes widened when she saw Adrian. "Oh, the tall man." Iris peeked around her sister, quieter but just as curious. Harper's expression shifted instantly, from professional to mother. "Back upstairs," she said gently. "I'll be there in a second." Luna ignored that completely and trotted into the room, socks sliding a little on the wooden floor. "What's your name again?" she asked Adrian, hands on her hips. "Adrian," he said. She frowned. "That's too serious," she said. "Can I call you A?" "Luna," Harper said warningly. He laughed. "You can call me whatever your mom allows," he said. "My mom allows everything," Luna declared, "except jumping off the stairs and using scissors on my hair and eating pins." "So not everything," Iris murmured, tugging her sister's sleeve. Adrian looked at Harper. She was watching them, jaw clenched in a way that said she was holding something back. And for the first time, he saw it clearly. This wasn't just a woman who'd taken in two random children because it seemed like the kind thing to do. This was someone who had built an entire life around them, stitch by stitch. He felt the ground under his feet shift again. He wasn't sure if he had the right to step into it. The letters in the tin box sat like a weight on the shelf above Harper's bed. Some nights, she could almost ignore them. Other nights, like this one, they might as well have glowed in the dark. She sat cross-legged on the quilt, the twins' soft snores drifting down from their bunk beds. A small reading lamp cast a pool of light. Her hand hovered near the box but didn't touch it. "Just open one," she whispered to herself. "Just one." She didn't. Downstairs, earlier, Iris had knocked over a stack of fabric and sent the tin clattering to the floor. It had sprung open, spilling its contents hospital forms, the half photograph, a few wrinkled social services envelopes with her name printed in official font. Harper had snapped, grabbing them up with more force than necessary. "Don't touch that," she'd said, too sharply. Iris's eyes had filled with tears. Luna had stepped in front of her twin, chin out in protective indignation. "They're just papers," Luna had said. Harper had taken a breath, forcing her voice to soften. "They're grown-up papers," she'd said, "not fun ones." Later, she'd apologize, holding them both until their stiff little shoulders finally relaxed. But now, alone, the guilt sat heavy. She knew what some of those letters said without opening them. Reevaluation. Home study? Custody review. Words that meant people might come into this space and decide it was not enough. That she was not enough. Like they had decided that once, when she was 19 and Milo was 11, and they'd said, "He needs more than you can give." Her phone buzzed. She flinched, then reached for it. A text from her friend, Jess, who ran the bookshop down the street. "You alive or buried in thread?" Harper smiled despite herself. "Barely alive." Jess replied almost instantly. "Heard Mr. City Moneybags was in your shop today." Spill. Harper hesitated. He wants a suit. I heard Iris and Luna call him A already." Jess replied. "Careful, Harper." Harper stared at the screen. She thought of Adrian's hands, careful on her daughter's shoelaces, of the way he had crouched to their height, not looming, of the sadness behind his eyes. She also thought of the TV in Jess's shop, the way Jess had frozen earlier that week when a news clip about Cole Biogen had cut into the afternoon talk show. "That's the man from the posters," Jess had said. "The one who lost his family in that smart home fire. They did a documentary about it." Harper had pretended not to hear. She couldn't pretend now. Another message from Jess popped up. "Don't forget your own story because someone else's is louder." Harper put the phone down and shut off the lamp. In the dark, the past and the present crowded close. She was still lying there, eyes open, when she heard a thump from downstairs. Her heart jerked. It was too loud to be the radiator, too sharp to be the old building settling. Then came the sound of shattering glass. She was on her feet before she was fully awake, adrenaline wiping the last traces of sleep from her brain. She slipped out of the room, eased the door mostly closed behind her so the girl stayed out of sight, and moved down the narrow stairs. The front window of the shop glittered across the floor in a shower of broken pieces. Cold air knifed through the gap. A brick lay on the rug. Something was taped to it. Harper's breath clouded in front of her as she approached. Her boots crunched on glass. She picked up the brick with shaking hands, peeled away the tape, and unrolled the paper. The message was scrawled in thick, uneven letters. Stop asking about that fire. Her skin went ice cold in a way that had nothing to do with the wind. She had not been asking. Not yet. She had not called any lawyers, not looked up any old police reports, not spoken aloud the connection her brain had started to make. Someone thought she might. The back of her neck prickled. She became aware of another presence in the room. Harper, Adrian's voice, low and alert, came from the doorway. He stepped inside, glancing automatically up and down the street before closing the door behind him. What happened, he asked. She swallowed, still staring at the paper. Someone's idea of a joke, she said, but her voice wobbled. He looked at the glass, the brick, the open air. That's not a joke, he said. He took the note from her fingers and read it. His jaw tightened. You didn't do anything wrong, he said. I took in 2 babies whose names I didn't know, she said. Kept them overnight before I called anyone. Let the hospital put my name on forms I didn't entirely understand. Your company was on the news while I was feeding them bottles. Her fingers curled. If someone wanted to make that look wrong, she said quietly, they could. He saw it then, clearly. How every system that had failed him, investigations, internal reviews, technical audits, had a cousin in the system that had failed her. I'll fix the window, he said. She let out a short, incredulous laugh. You can't fix everything with a check. Adrian, she said. I know, he replied, but I can fix the glass. And I can call a friend in Seattle who still has access to the original case file. And I can say out loud that I think those girls are my children and that you have been their mother longer than anyone. Her breath hitched. She looked at him. Are you sure? She whispered. No, he said honestly. I'm not sure of anything except this. I buried 2 nearly empty coffins. And I've been letting the world tell me I should accept that. Now I've seen their faces. I've heard one of them talk about a room she should not remember. And I've seen how they look at you. He held up the note. Whoever threw this brick is afraid of the truth, he said. That means the truth is there to be found. Silence stretched between them, thick and taut. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. A small voice called out, Mom. Harper straightened. Go back to bed. Baby, she called. It's just the wind. I'll be up in a minute. And she turned back to Adrian. Her hands shook. You have no idea what you're asking, she said. Yes, he said quietly. I do. I could lose them, she whispered. So could I, he said. Again, if we don't do this right. She thought of Milo, of a car door closing, of taillights disappearing. She thought of Iris and Luna, their small bodies warm in her arms that first night. She thought of the words on the back of the torn photograph, for the one who keeps them together. She closed her eyes. When she opened them again, something in her face had changed. Okay, she said, but we do it on my terms. Together, no backroom deals, no using your money to steamroll anyone, even if they deserve it. He nodded. Together, he said. The DNA test took longer than anyone wanted. Days stretched into weeks. In between, life tried to go on. Harper hemmed jeans and patched elbows. She walked the girls to school. She pretended not to notice when Luna drew pictures of 3 stick figures holding hands, and then added a 4th, taller one. Adrian split his time between Willow Ridge and Seattle. In Seattle, he went to his office and sat across from lawyers and old colleagues. Names resurfaced: Greg Hale, the former head of the Smart Home Division, contractors, safety inspectors. He pored over old emails, reports, logs. Things he had skimmed in his grief now burned with new meaning. How did we sign off on this? He asked his general counsel one night, voice rough. How did we accept this as an accident? We trusted the initial investigation, she said. We trusted Greg's reports. He thought of the brick through Harper's window and didn't say what he was thinking. We were wrong. Back in Willow Ridge, a different kind of investigation simmered. Jess, ever the gossip hub, kept an eye on the news feeds. Random comments appeared on local message boards. Did you see that Cole guy hanging around the tailor shop? Heard the twins might be his. Poor Harper. Harper tried not to read them. She failed. One evening, as snow dusted the windows again, the phone rang. She almost let it go to voicemail. Hello, she said, finally picking up. Ms. Quinn, the voice was clipped. Professional. This is Child and Family Services. We need to schedule a home visit. It's overdue. Her fingers went numb. Of course, she said. The appointment was set for the following week. After she hung up, she sat at the kitchen table and stared at the tin box for a long time. Then she opened it. She smoothed out the oldest letter and read it properly for the first time. The words blurred, then sharpened. Concerns, review, placement. She did not sleep much that night. The next morning, after dropping the girls at school, she walked to the little park at the edge of town. Adrian was already there, sitting on a bench, hands jammed into his coat pockets, breath frosting in front of him. He stood when he saw her. "You look like I feel," he said. She laughed once without humor. "Child Services called," she said. "They're coming." He swore softly. "Good," he said after a moment. She stared at him. "Good," she repeated. "If we want this to be real," he said, "we have to stop living like we're hiding. We can tell them everything. Show them the test when it comes back. Show them what you've built. They'll see a foster kid who kept 2 babies overnight and didn't open her mail," she said. "They'll see every mistake I've made. They'll also see 2 healthy, loved kids," he said. "They'll see a woman who worked herself raw to give them a home. And if they decide it's not enough," she whispered. He looked at her for a long time. "Then I stand next to you," he said. "Not in front of you, not behind you. Next to you, Ambassador. And I use every ounce of influence I have to make them see what I see." Her eyes stung. "Don't promise things you can't keep," she said. "I've kept worse," he said softly. "I've kept silence. I'm done with that." The day the DNA results came, the sky was painfully clear. Adrian and Harper sat in the small office of a local clinic, the hum of the heater and the tick of the wall clock loud in the quiet. The doctor, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, looked at the file. "They're your daughters," she said to Adrian. "Genetically, there's no question." Harper's breath left her lungs in a rush. Part of her had known. From the way Iris cocked her head when thinking, so like the man in front of her. From the shape of Luna's smile, from the necklaces and the half photo. But hearing it put into words was different. Adrian closed his eyes. For a moment when he simply sat there, swallowing, his hand pressed over his mouth. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse. "Thank you," he said. "The next steps are complicated," the doctor said gently. "Legally, emotionally." "We know," Harper said. She reached into her bag and took out the torn photograph. She laid it on the desk. "We've been pretending not to," she added. "But we do. The courtrooms in big cities are designed to be impressive. This one was no exception. High ceilings, polished wood, flags in the corner, a seal on the wall behind the judge. It all blurred together for Harper. What she saw, sharply, were the faces. Iris and Luna sitting with a court-appointed advocate, dressed in simple dark dresses with their leaf necklaces tucked under their collars. Their feet swung nervously above the floor. Adrian beside them, his hand resting on the back of their bench. Milo in the second row, twisting his hat in his hands, looking both older and younger than the 25 years he carried. It had been Jess's idea to put a photo in the local paper. Local seamstress at center of high-profile case. They hadn't mentioned Harper's last name. They had blurred the twins' faces. But Milo had seen enough. He'd shown up at Thread and Ember 3 days before the hearing, duffel bag over his shoulder, eyes wide. Harper, he'd said, she'd dropped her scissors. Now, in the courtroom, he sat behind her like a steady weight, even as his knee bounced. At the front, Greg Hale sat at the defense table. He was in his 40s, hair thinning, jaw set. He looked like any number of executives Adrian had worked with over the years. Ordinary, forgettable, except for his eyes. They darted around the room, calculating, weighing, looking for leverage. The prosecutor laid out the case. Evidence from the smart home system. Internal emails where Greg had dismissed safety concerns. The recovered video from the neighbor's old doorbell camera, showing Greg carrying 2 bundled shapes out of Adrian's house days before the fire. Then came the defense's turn. Greg's lawyer, a sleek man with a perfect knot in his tie, shifted the spotlight. Yes, mistakes were made, he said smoothly. But we must also examine the actions of Miss Harper Quinn. Harper's stomach clenched. The lawyer walked the court through the night of the storm, emphasizing every deviation from protocol. She did not call authorities immediately, he said. She kept the infants in her care without informing the proper agencies. She resisted contact with child and family services. She has a history in the foster system herself. He gestured toward Harper with an open hand. Is it not possible, he said, that Miss Quinn's unresolved trauma led her to make impulsive, perhaps even harmful choices, that she clung to these children not out of selfless love, but out of a need to heal her own wounds? The words hit their mark. Harper felt them like blows. Shame rose hot in her chest. She'd always known how her story looked on paper. Hearing it spoken aloud in this room made it feel uglier. Her lawyer began to stand. Before she could speak, another voice cut through. Your Honor, it was Milo. He stood shakily, hat still in his hands. The judge regarded him. You are Milo Quinn, he said, Harper's brother. The defense lawyer objected. The judge held up a hand. You'll have your chance to respond. She said, Mr. Quinn, do you have information that is not already in Ms. Quinn's file? Yes, ma'am, he said. Because nobody ever asked me before. The judge nodded slowly. Come forward, she said. He walked to the witness stand, every step awkward but determined. He was sworn in. He sat. He gripped the edge of the wooden railing like a lifeline. Mr. Quinn, the prosecutor said gently, can you tell us about your childhood with your sister? Milo swallowed. Harper raised me, he said. Our parents were in and out. She was the one who made sure I ate, that I did homework. She'd sew patches on my clothes so I didn't get made fun of at school. He took a shaky breath. When I was 11, a social worker came. He said, they said the house we were in wasn't safe. They said I was going to a better place. Harper begged them not to take me. They didn't listen. His voice cracked. They moved me to a home where the man who was supposed to take care of us drank. He said, he hit people. He hit me. I ran away at 13, lived in cars, shelters. He looked over at Harper. She tried to find me, he said. She called, wrote letters. Nobody returned them. Nobody told her where I was. The system didn't just fail me. It failed her. He looked back at this defense lawyer. You say she clings to kids because of trauma, he said. Maybe. But when you've been the kid nobody fought for, and then you see 2 babies left in the snow, what else are you supposed to do? Walk away. Silence filled the courtroom. Even the defense lawyer had no immediate reply. Milo's hands shook. She kept Iris and Luna alive, he said. She kept them together when the world had already tried to burn them and bury them once. Whatever mistakes she made on paper, in real life she did what no one ever did for us. And he swallowed again. That's all, he said. He stepped down. Harper's vision blurred with tears. She met his eyes as he passed. And in that moment, years of distance and loss folded in on themselves. Later, her lawyer would make calm, reasoned arguments. She would point to the twins' health, to their school reports, to the way both girls had told the advocate, we want both mommy and daddy. Adrian would speak too, briefly. I failed my family once, he would say, voice low. I believed a story because it was easier than asking harder questions. I won't make that mistake again. These children have 2 parents. They deserve to keep them. In the end, when the judge's gavel came down, the verdicts were clear. Greg Hale was found guilty on multiple counts: negligent homicide, arson, kidnapping. Sentencing would come later. For now, what mattered to Harper was the judge's next words. Regarding the custody and legal status of Iris and Luna, she said, looking over her glasses, the court finds that Ms. Quinn's actions, while technically outside strict procedure, were taken in good faith and resulted in no harm to the children. On the contrary, she has provided consistent care, love, and stability. Harper's knees trembled. The court also recognizes Mr. Cole as the biological father. The judge continued, given the strong bonds between the children and both adults and their expressed wishes, this court grants joint legal custody to Mr. Adrian Cole and Ms. Harper Quinn. Harper exhaled. The sound came out as a sob. Iris and Luna twisted in their seats, looking between the adults, not entirely understanding all the words, but feeling the shift. Does that mean we don't have to pick? Luna whispered to the advocate. It means you get both, the woman said, smiling. Luna grinned. Good, she said. We already decided that. The sign above the shop changed one crisp afternoon, almost a year later. The old hand-painted letters that read Thread and Ember were still there. Harper couldn't bear to lose them. But beneath, in smaller new script, another line had been added. Harper and Daughters. And under that, in even smaller letters, almost like a secret, stitched by Grace and Truth. Jess had cried when she saw it. I always knew you were fancy, she said, wiping her nose with her sleeve. Adrian had just smiled, hands in his pockets, watching as Iris and Luna admired the new sign like it was a piece of art. Life had not turned into a fairy tale overnight. There were still papers to sign, meetings with social workers, therapy appointments for the girls, hard conversations about Elena, about the fire, about what dead meant. There were days when Iris woke from a dream and cried because she couldn't pick which house to sleep at. There were afternoons when Luna tested every boundary twice, just to be sure they were still there. There were quiet nights when Harper woke up panicked, half expecting to find an empty bunk, an official letter on the table, proof that it had all been taken away. On those nights, she would pad downstairs and find the lights still on in the back of the shop. Adrian would be there sometimes, laptop open, tie loosened, spreadsheets glowing on the screen. He was in Willow Ridge more now. He still ran a company. He still flew to cities where the buildings scraped the sky. But he came back to Thread and Ember as often as he could. Sometimes with big gestures, a new industrial sewing machine, repaired and polished. Sometimes with small ones, a mug of hot chocolate left on her cutting table. He had set up a foundation with part of the settlement money from the lawsuit against Greg and the contractors. Thread and Shelter. Its mission statement was simple: to support kids in foster care and the people who cared for them. So fewer Harpers and Milos fell through cracks. Harper sat on the board. She hated the meetings, at first hated the jargon, the acronyms, the way dollars turned into graphs. Adrian sat next to her, translating quietly. When someone said, we need to optimize placement outcomes, she would lean over and whisper, they mean making sure kids don't get stuck with people who don't care. He would nod. Yes, he'd say. And making sure the people who do care have rent and food and someone to call at 3 in the morning. Little by little, the language of the people who signed things began to change. On winter evenings, the loft above the shop glowed like a lantern. One such evening, snow drifted past the window in slow, steady flakes. Harper sat on the floor near the low coffee table, a patchwork of fabric spread out before her. She was repairing an old quilt, one that had lived in the shop longer than she had. Its colors had faded, but its seams held stories. Adrian sat opposite her, sleeves rolled up, carefully threading a needle under her instruction. Hold it closer to the light, she said. Your eyes aren't used to this. I signed documents for billions, he said. Surely I can handle one piece of thread. He missed the eye of the needle again. Iris lay on her stomach nearby, colored pencils scattered around her, drawing on a large sheet of paper. Her tongue poked out slightly between her teeth, a habit she shared with Harper when concentrating. Luna sat cross-legged with a pile of fabric scraps and a glue stick, creating her own collage. What are you making? Harper asked, glancing over. A house, Iris said without looking up. Adrian's hand paused. He watched as Iris sketched a simple 2-story shape. Windows, a door, a chimney. No flames. It's the old house, she said calmly, but not on fire. I put smoke from the chimney because that means soup, not danger. Harper's eyes met Adrian's. He swallowed hard, and these Luna piped up, holding up 2 small rectangles of fabric she'd cut. She glued one above a window and wrote Mom on it in blocky letters with a marker. She glued another above the door and wrote Dad. This window is your room, she told Harper. so you can see if it snows. She stuck the other fabric piece firmly in place. And this one is for Dad, she said, so he always knows where home is, even if his head is in the clouds with his machines. Adrian laughed softly. I'll take that, he said, head in the clouds and feet on this floor. He finally managed to thread the needle. Harper watched him make his first clumsy stitch in the quilt. It was not perfectly straight. It pulled the fabric a little too tight, but it held. Outside, the snow fell thicker, muffling the town. Inside, there was the quiet scratch of pencil on paper, the soft sound of fabric against fabric, the faint murmur of someone humming off-key. Harper looked around the small loft, the beds, the worn couch, the quilts, the scattered toys, and felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the radiator. For years, she had been waiting for someone to knock on her door and take everything away. Now, if anyone knocked, there would be more than one person to answer. There would be her, there would be Adrian, there would be two girls with leaf necklaces who refused to be separated. And on some days, there would be Milo on the couch, teasing Luna and helping Iris shade the corners of her drawings. Harper picked up her needle again. She pushed it through the fabric, pulled it out, tugged the thread until the stitch lay neat and snug. Not perfect, but strong, she smiled to herself. The world, she knew, could unravel so easily. But tonight, in this small, bright place above a main street in a snow-covered town, they were stitching it back together, one quiet, careful line at a time.